All right, another day, another podcast. We are looking at developing a capacity for resilience, and I'm adding some additional material from the second edition of the book that came out after I had completed recording the first edition. But that's life, and always good to learn more. As the author learns more, he feels, you know, that he must report more material in his book, and I must. I did something here. Okay, let me turn off the. I have this fancy table lamp that I use sometimes when the light is not good on my face, but anyway, after decades of studies pointing out the continuously poor performance of capacity development, the underlying reasons for this predicament have started to attract increasing attention. One of the primary reasons for the generally poor performance concerns clashing principles. So you have multiple players, multiple stakeholders, internal partners, external partners, and we have already talked about how the language and Babylonian confusion can be a problem, but also even the principles can be conflicting. In other words, whilst most actors involved in capacity development are well aware of how it should be done in principle, they cannot work in accordance with all principles, since some of them are actually contradictory, resulting most pertinently in misguided accountability and temporal discord. So you may start with great enthusiasm together, thinking you're on the same page, but as you keep moving forward with the projects, then accountability becomes important for successes and failures, and then of course discords begin to arise. So misguided accountability then is about most partners in capacity development focusing mainly their accountability upward along the aid chain. So here is what we mean: community members. So an aid chain for a capacity development program of the Red Cross, you have taxpayers on one end who contribute, and the governments involved, of course, and the other end you have community members. So you have, let's say, Red Cross volunteers most directly linked with the community members, but they are also linked upwards towards National Red Cross Society, and they have partner national societies that work with them. Then they have donors. Every time there is a big crisis, floods, droughts, wildfires, earthquakes, we all contribute to Red Cross, and we always have to worry about their overhead. How much of the money I give actually goes to what I want it to go to, but that's also not easy to track because they pool the money and use it as they see fit. But nonetheless, taxpayers come at the top of this chain. So this misguided accountability clashes either directly or indirectly with other principles, whilst the paramount accountability should be directed towards the beneficiaries. The system is rigged against that, as it demands predictability, deliverables, and reporting back to the donor. So donors can begin to assert power and seek accountability that is beyond the chain that we looked at. The principles of ownership and flexibility clash directly with such upward accountability, as most external partners are reluctant to relinquish control over planned activities due to the perceived risk of the initiative not delivering as expected. So just because I contributed a little bit, do I have the right or the authority to demand that Red Cross report to me somehow on how the money was spent? Can I just look at their good work and say the money has been used in a good way? The principle of learning also clashes directly with this upward accountability, since it usually entails an overwhelming focus on monitoring and evaluating capacity development initiatives against predefined deliverables and not on the learning and actual impact. So metrics are good. Monitoring and evaluating is always critical to ensure progress, efficiency, and effectiveness, but can it sometimes become a little too much in terms of reporting requirements, as opposed to just looking at how the learning and actual impacts are happening on the ground, where the capacity development is supposed to be happening. So we also have principles versus perspectives. So principles versus principles and principles versus perspectives. The principles of capacity development not only clash with each other in our complex, uncertain, ambiguous and dynamic world. These four fundamental challenges also influence our underlying perspectives in the sense of our attitudes and viewpoints toward capacity development. The human environment system in question is also part of the perspective, and of course the world, which can also work against the principles of capacity development. What do we mean? There is a mindset lag. So first of all, there is a clear lag between the rapidly changing world and the pace of change in the mindsets of the actors involved in the capacity development. So we are coming with some training, some background, some experience, and we think we know we are doing capacity development in the right way, but then the world in which we are doing it keeps changing rapidly. So this is called by Hagelstein and Becker as the mindset lag, and demonstrate how it determines the effectiveness of capacity development, as most external partners continue to work the same way they have always done, regardless of the astonishing developments in many parts of the world. External partners focus their assistance on politically defined priority countries and design capacity development based on the resource they have that is available rather than the need of the internal partners, and they push for their predefined objectives with blueprint solutions and do most of the work themselves, whilst blaming the disinterest of internal partners on culture of the internal partners, lack of capacity, corruption, etc. So it's very easy to find ways to blame failures on the internal partners, because indeed you are going into a different culture. African countries, Asian countries, South American countries, or even Western Hemisphere, let's say like Haiti, or as the French say, Haiti, and they are different cultures. There is lack of capacity, there is corruption, but is everything to be blamed on that, or are you being disconnected and coming with your blueprint and trying to implement it rather than what is needed? So essentially a contemporary version of the white man's burden. Although this approach to capacity development has never worked, it is high time for external partners to realize that the contexts they engage in are diverse, and hardly any places are still like they were in the 1950s or even just 10 years ago. What is the white man's burden? Here is the white man's burden depicted by Gillum in 1899 with clear racist undertones, showing John Bull and Uncle Sam carrying the world's people of color towards civilization. Wow, he's carrying, Uncle Sam is carrying the minorities on his back, and so is John Bull of the UK. So there is an undertone of saying colored people are backward and they don't have capacity, they are corrupt and they need help. And they do need help, but not in the sense that you are trying to impose it, right? So so that needs to be kept in mind in terms of the mindset lag. And also there is the idea of Quixotic control. So the next underlying perspective that undermines the principles for capacity development is the immense need for control that permeates the entire system for capacity development. So Hagelstein and Becker refer to this as Quixotic control, with an apparent reference to Don Quixote's refusal to change his beliefs and actions regardless of the obvious need to do so. Right? Once you are in charge of doing something, you have gone in as the savior, the capacity builder. You come in with your baggage and you don't see the need to change. You think the system that you are trying to help has to change, and not help them with their system that they are living with. Right? Donors commonly have predetermined priority countries and issues, and often define in advance where and for what their funding can be used. As I said, when I donate to Red Cross for a particular event, I'm saying my money should go there, even though it's not much money. That undermines the actual potential for needs-driven assistance already from the start. That's a handicap you're starting with. Partners wanting to engage in capacity development typically have to apply for funding relating to these conditionalities and describing what they would achieve with the money and how they would accomplish that. So projectification is good, but that can miss a lot of things when you impose timelines and conditionalities. If granted the money, these descriptions add to the conditionalities since they are now what the donor expects from the initiative. For each step downwards along the aid chain, the partner with the funding adds conditionalities for the partner below, increasingly restricting the use of the money until little or no flexibility is left when it finally reaches the people actually implementing the activities on the ground. These cascading conditionalities effectively undermine most of the principles for capacity development, with devastating effects on effectiveness of the capacity development. So you can see that there are principles, but in practicality this need for control can end up actually working completely contrary to the main goal of capacity development. So quixotic control can, paradoxically enough, also be a result of the level of participation. The more people participate in designing the capacity development initiative, the more difficult and time consuming the decision making becomes. So you don't hand over control and ownership, so decision making tends to rely on external partners or be forced by external partners to go in a certain direction that is not intuitive or consistent with indigenous knowledge. So I have a cleaner coming in, so let me stop for a second and come back and continue. Yeah, I should make it clear that I work from home just for convenience. My office tends to have a lot of people coming and going, and it's got a lot of pigeons in the false ceiling, which bothers me because pigeon shit can give you some serious respiratory issues, and they are unable to or unwilling to address this issue. So just to say why I'm working at home and why the cleaner coming interrupts the recording, but nonetheless, quixotic control can paradoxically enough also be a result of the level of participation. The more people participate in designing the capacity development initiative, the more difficult and time consuming the decision making becomes or can become. We'll see that in a minute. The more energy and resources invested in finally getting all actors on board, the less willing the actors are to propose changes that require them to redo or at least part of the process reconsider, binding them to the initial plan via a distributed network of control, irrespective of what happens over the course of the initiative. So you start something, everybody is committed, everybody invests a lot of time, energy and resources go in, and then you keep proceeding and you realize after some time that we need to be flexible and modify some of the things, but then it becomes too difficult because people make a calculation saying, is it really necessary to make a big change? Is it really going to matter so much? And you continue along the same way, and soon you may be very far from where you need to be. So what is quixotic control? When everybody finally is on board, nobody wants to open the discussion again, so decision making can become more and more difficult and time consuming as well. Okay, so maybe I should leave this here and come back and do the designing capacity development in the next podcast, since it's a nice topic that we need to look at. So this is already about 12 minutes anyway, so see you in the next podcast.